Ahava, meaning love in Hebrew, is a multi-award winning performer from the San Francisco Bay Area. She's well known for her graceful Egyptian style, commanding stage presence, and crowd-pleasing drum solos. Ahava, being the eternal student, is committed to studying not only Middle Eastern dance but also the language and culture. She continues to attend workshops, seminars, and read and learn as much as she can so that she's not only a knowledgeable dancer, but a knowledgeable teacher as well. Her dance journey began at the age of 9. She began to study West African Senegalese dance and perform throughout the Oakland Unified School District. As she got older, she began to take Western dances, including ballet, jazz, modern, and hip-hop. But at 14, her dance career was put on hiatus. In May of 2000, Ahava suffered a terrible injury from a hit-and-run accident. Between all the surgeries and physical therapy, it took over 2 years for her to fully recover. At 16, Ahava accidentally discovered belly dance and quickly became infatuated with the rhythms, melody, and the language. After years of studying different dance styles, she realized that belly dance was her true calling. Ahava is heavily influenced by Egyptian dancers such as Samia Gamal, Tahia Carioca, and Naima Akef for their grace, Mona Saeed and Sahar Hamdi for their beautiful arms and hands, and the one and only Fifi Abdo for her wit and boldness. Ahava has had the great honor of performing for Madame Fifi twice. In the summer of 2007, Ahava traveled to Cairo for the annual Ahlan wa Sahlan festival. As an invited performer, she danced in the famous closing gala show for an audience of nearly 2,000 people. A true rising star, Ahava has won many titles, including the 2006 Queen of Raksharki, 2007 Egyptian Champion, and the 2008 Belly Dancer of the Year. She is also the featured dancer in several performance and instructional DVDs, and much more. Please welcome Ahava.
Thank you so much for joining me for Dance Chat. It is a pleasure to get a chance to speak with you. We've passed paths a few times in the years, but we've never had a conversation. So it's an actual true privilege and pleasure to be able to have this time with you. So I wanted to actually just kind of start at the beginning, because I know that you started studying dance as a child when you were 9, if I remember correctly. But do you remember? I think all of us do. How did you first discover Middle Eastern dance in particular?
I had been taking dance classes. I think I was taking hip hop, and then was doing that, was doing well, and then I had a car accident and was not able to dance for a little over a year. And I was on the internet and saw these videos for like belly dance instruction. And so I asked my mom, I think I was like 15 or 16 at the time, and I asked my mom if she could buy them for me, and she did. And then I became obsessed um, by, watching those videos. And then I asked her to help me find like in-person classes, which she did. We found a local class, and I would go there once a week, and it just started from there. I just was completely obsessed.
Having gone through a variety of injuries at that point, did you find the movement more appealing, or was it something that was just aesthetically drawing your attention? Or
I think it was both. Um, I love the percussion um, part of it because it reminded me of a lot of the African dance I took when I was younger. Um, and I love like moving my body in different ways than the West African dance that I was doing when I was younger, and the contrast that there was in the movement. So I like that part, and then of course the aesthetic part, the costumes and the hair and makeup and stuff. dressing up um, was very, very appealing for like a teenager. Um, so it was both for me.
Fantastic. And this was all in the Bay Area, which has such an amazing, thriving dance scene. I mean, has changed obviously a lot over the years as
Yeah,
well within that. Um, were there other students of your age in the class at that time? Or because it seems this
no,
is generally a form that most of us, unless we grew up with it, come into a little bit later.
yeah, I was the youngest in my class. Um, so which was interesting, but I didn't mind it. I was happy to be moving again after not being able to dance for a long time. It was my happy space. So
Wonderful. Yeah, I think dance easily becomes a sanctuary for most of us
yeah.
and as a way to take care of our health, to be able to be genuine to ourselves, to find even what that means, and so many things.
Hmm.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
And then you really shifted into a lot of competitions at a certain point. What drew you towards doing the dance competitions?
So the competitions came because, like, honestly, I got a little bored. I was doing, I think I had just started dancing in local restaurants, and it was fun, but I wanted more of a challenge. And so I saw that there were competitions, and so it was a challenge for me to work harder on my craft. And um, I love the preparation um, that goes into competition, or went into competitions at the time. Picking out the music, the costumes. Um, it was something for me to look forward to, and I also got feedback. I like the feedback component of it as well, because when you're dancing in restaurants, the way I was at the time, it you don't get feedback from your peers. I mean, I was still taking classes and workshops and stuff like that, but I wanted to know, like, if I was doing it good or you're doing it well. So the feedback really helped me work even harder and see like my areas of where I need to focus on a little bit more. And a lot of it in the beginning was like my facial expressions and um, doing more professional makeup, like stage makeup, because I was, very much in the beginning phases of like learning, how to pick the correct foundation and how to do eye makeup and put on eyelashes, all the struggles that we all went through as baby dancers. So I like that. It gave me something to look forward to and work towards. And the reward was the performance um, for dancers and getting the feedback. Um, that I really enjoyed it.
Were there how did you go about, so I think the finishing touches of like the performance side of it, like the showmanship of it, the especially the makeup. I mean, I remember as a young dancer, my teachers kept telling me to put more on my face, and I didn't understand what that meant because I didn't wear makeup on a regular basis prior anyways.
Yep, me too.
So I mean, now there's so many resources on like YouTube, and like I mean, you can learn everything online, but were there certain things that you could seek out to kind of advise for that? Or I mean, I think now it was only actually, I think in the last maybe 5 years or so that I started seeing like makeup workshops for dancers. Um,
At
but
the time, I mean, the studio that I was at, there were like, she did have workshops where, we would all come in with our makeup and, try to put on our face. Um, what really helped me was going to Mac and, sitting down with the consultant and having them do my makeup and recommend. I would tell them what I would do. competing for this dance, you know, competition, and they'd be like, okay, well, you need this type of foundation. Um, you need eyelashes. You need, you know, what color is your costume? You know what I mean? So it became like this really fun, you know, way to play in makeup. Um, so that's what I was doing in the beginning, and then once I got like all my staple like makeup, I got my brushes, and you know all the things that we collect as professional dancers. Then I was able to figure out what worked for me, and you know what looks that I liked, and um, I yeah. So,
Within competing and getting that feedback, and were there any specific other lessons that you had as a part of the competition experience that you would like to share?
um, something that I think helped me when I was competing was I wasn't just the the headspace that you're in, right? And we hear the word competition and it's like you against, you know, the other dancers. But for me, it was me against who I was, you know, as a dancer in the last competition. So when I teach dance, when dancers, you know, reach out to me for coaching, I'd be like, well, I try to get an understanding of why they want to compete. And if I'm hearing, you know, oh, I want to be better than, you know, X, Y, Z, or you know, these very like in comparison to others, then I want to try to shift that thinking because that's not going to bring that person very far. Or maybe, you know, I'm not the right coach for them. So for me, it was me against myself, who I was, you know, prior to that competition. I think that's like the main takeaway that I can think of. And, you know, just have fun with it. There's so many competitions now, or, you know, there was, you know, almost like an oversaturation at one point. So it was hard to pick and choose which, you know, to go for. But um, you have to remember to have fun with it. And it's about growth and um, performing, you know, for yourself and, you know, making sure that your audience is entertained. And yeah, I think those are the main takeaways for me.
Well, it seems like you came into it really within the idea that the competition was going to be a learning experience versus maybe a validation experience.
Yeah, yeah. I because I, you know, like I said before, I came into it wanting to get feedback from dancers who have been doing it way longer than I had and who could see things that maybe I couldn't see. And so with the feedback, something that I learned is to have like I don't know if discernment is the right word, but you know, reading the feedback and being like, okay, that makes sense. I can take that and learn from it as opposed to something that maybe I disagreed with or didn't think was very helpful. Um, and you know, taking the good and the bad and then moving forward from that. So it was wanting, you know, to like show who I am as a dancer at that time, you know, with that technique that I had at the time and, you know, who I was in that moment. Um, and sort of like getting my name out there as a professional dancer, um, but not like, love me, you know, like not in that sort of way, but like, hey, I'm here. My name's Ahava. How you doing? This is me. You know?
And one, I think being able to discern the feedback that you're getting is an amazing skill that can be really difficult. And it's something that I've had some interesting conversations within our dance community specifically about that. Sometimes it feels like it's a bit more contentious in the idea that we can hold on to these narratives that the community is really inclusive, right? And that must mean that we don't give feedback. And I've never understood that line of thinking necessarily, because feedback isn't about like tearing somebody down or excluding somebody, but it's really about the idea of actually support, and that you want them to shine and thrive, which is why you're giving feedback. And there's just this interesting duality, I think, in the way that some people approach even the concept of feedback, whether they are the giver or the receiver of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's like, you know, people on both sides, dancers who love competing and then dancers who don't see the point in it. But it depends on the individual. I personally uh, enjoyed that process, and I took it for what it was. It didn't, for me, didn't take, you know, the feedback. It wasn't always positive. The negative ones, I didn't take it to heart. I was like, okay, well, on to the next. Because again, it was about my growth and um, being better. Like I wanted to be the best version of myself as a dancer, and this was my way of that was my way of doing it at the time.
And so, within the idea of like pushing your studies forward, when did you first go to Egypt, and what inspired that first trip?
So I won a competition, and that was my prize. Uh, and I went for the first time in 2007, I want to say, and I went to Ahlan Sahlan, um, and I had competed in Little Egypt's Queen of Rock Sharkey competition, and that was the prize to go to Egypt. And it was so fun. It was such a great experience. I went with another dancer, also a friend of mine, and it was such a great experience. I'm so glad that I was, you know, brave enough to do that competition, because that was the one competition where I was like, ooh, that's there's going to be so many dancers, um, entering this competition, and maybe I should have, the self doubt came in, but then I was like, why not? And I won, and the next year I was on a plane to Egypt, so it was kind of surreal for me at that time.
And so, I mean, I remember the first time that I went to Egypt, it was when it had built up so much of this concept around in my brain of one that I felt like this was what I was supposed to be doing with my life. But I was finally going to Egypt to actually get a chance to study the culture more. And um, I don't, I think I just had like a lot of expectations around what I might experience, I mean, it was profound and life changing in so many different types of ways. Did you have any um, kinds of goals or like thoughts on that plane ride out on the way there, or that were different, or?
So I didn't know fully what to expect. I knew it was like a festival. You take classes. There's all these shows at night. It was in this beautiful resort. You know what I mean? So I was just kind of like, hey, I'm here. Kind of whatever comes. I'm here for it. So what really something that I was really focused on was like learning, like when I was in the workshops, like really absorbing what I was seeing from Egyptian dancers, because this was like a point in my dancing where I was shifting from more of an American cabaret style to more of an Egyptian style dancer. Um, and so taking classes from Egyptian dancers, I was really focusing on the entire body and the nuances that um, are hard to pick up, in a video, or that you don't necessarily see, in the Bay Area. So just really absorbing everything was my main goal. And I did just that. I remember just I don't know whose workshop it was, but I sat down and I fell asleep, and I was so embarrassed because I was so so tired. But like I had been up, going to shows and you know really trying to absorb everything so that I could take that home with me and continue um, practicing and learning. So,
And so when you came back, did you have like a different sense of how you wanted to approach your dancing or what you wanted to do with your dance?
yeah, I wanted it to be more, I want to say subtle and not so much. Um, I wanted to use less props, right? I think at that time I was still doing a lot of restaurant work, so it was sort of like an expectation. But I was slowly withdrawing from that, so I would come out with a veil, um, and instead of like a sword, I would do like a cane. Um, and so I was like stepping away from a lot of the props and really diving into uh, language, like learning the language and understanding the songs and the lyrics that I was dancing to so that I could, be fully aware. you know, it, just because something sounds like a pop song, it could be, something political that you aren't, aware of. So like just really like understanding and being mindful of like what I was doing. And drawing back a bit and being more in tune with the music and the musicality and um, the nuances that I was seeing from the Egyptian dancers when I was in Egypt, just bringing that back with me and making it my own. So,
And you've gotten a chance to dance for some of the absolute Egyptian dance greats. What goes through your mind when you're dancing, say, for Fifi Abdo, like, and you're standing in front of her and
it was I've done I'm stuttering because I'm like just like processing that I've done that twice. Um, and the first time I did more of like it was technically a shabby song. And I remember just being like so outside of myself, like I couldn't believe it. It was a packed room, but like she was, of course, sitting in the middle, um, the table in the middle, and I could only see her. Like the room was empty. In my head, the room was empty, and it was just me and Kiki in that room. And after the first performance, Dee Dee Assad had came to me. She was like, "That's such a great song." She was like, "Fifi wants your CD," because she liked the song that I danced. I was like, "She can have it. She, that's fine." And that was just like, I don't know. It made me smile, and I was like, "Oh my god," she liked my song. And then the second time I did Shabi as well. Um, uh, oh my god, I can't remember what song I danced to, but I wore the galabeya and the headscarf, the ode to Fifi, and someone had done something similar before my dance, and I think they danced to the same song, and that was like my nightmare, to not only have a similar costume but the same song. I was like, this has never happened to me, but of course it would happen on that night, and so I was a little like bummed out. But my friend was like, "No, don't trip off of that. It's gonna be fine." And then I went up and she was just like, "Whoa!" And I didn't know if it was because um, another person was doing something similar, or maybe she remembered me from the year before. I don't know what it was, but um, just having her look at me dance and just paying tribute to her as a dancer, and just how much she inspired me as a dancer. It's just such a trippy experience. She's very charismatic, and yeah, it was such a great experience. So,
So right before you go on that stage, because that you are kind of outlining like the dancer's worst nightmare, right? Like the costume, the music. I mean, I can just hear all my own gremlin voices being like, well, what do I have to bring to this stage that would be different? Or like, and like, do you have tools, talking about like mental focus, that helps you shift from potentially a downward spiral when those types of things are happening to a space of confidence and grounding and ownership?
yeah. So something happens like when I get really nervous, even more so now than I did, years ago before I go on stage. Um, but when the it's something about when the music starts and I'm like waiting in the wings, that it's just like there's no time for nerves, there's no time for butterflies. Then I get that confidence, like I am Ahava and I'm about to entertain this audience. We're about to have a good time, or I'm going to take them on this experience with me. And I just step into that uh, mindset when I hear my music start. And it's almost like a trance, if I'm being honest. And then when the music stops, I'm like, okay, time to get off stage now. And then I just sort of go back into my show. Um, but yeah, like before, when I'm like having all the nerves and everything, and then like I'm waiting, I'm like, okay, it's time to go. And then the music starts, and I'm like, okay, here we go. So it's a unique experience, but I love it. I don't like the nerves before. That's not pleasant, but like the the dancing and seeing the audience is I love that's the best experience for me.
I was just producing a show last night, and there were a variety of us sitting backstage, some of which have been performing for decades, and some of which are still relatively new to it. And what was, I think, beautiful for people to be able to share is how everybody goes through these nerves, regardless of how much they've done this. And a good friend of mine who has been professionally performing and touring around the world, for decades now and everything, she's like, does this ever go away? And my honest response was like, no. And I think if it does, it means it's no longer important. I think there is like kind of a gradient to it, obviously, that when that anxiety is getting overwhelming and unhealthy, and like that it really distracts your attention. And there's also just a good amount of nerves that kind of like reminds you that this is an important moment, that those few moments that we're on stage, right, are really just such an ephemeral blessing, really, to be in that. So yeah, nerves.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I did have, I mean, like I said, I always get nervous before um, performing or even before like teaching. Like I taught a few weeks ago in person, and I hadn't taught in over 3.5 years in person. And I was so nervous. I was like, oh my God, like, do I even remember how to do this? But it was, once again, once the music started, and I was like, oh, okay, I remember how to do this. Um, so same thing, when you're about to perform, there's all that nervous tension, and then you dance, and then it just melts away. But
Yeah, it's always when I feel like I'm at home, like, everything's okay. Even if I don't have the answers, everything is okay as soon as the dancing starts.
mm-hmm, yeah,
So, would you mind sharing what your dance practice is like?
my dance practice. Um, I have found that I like to practice at night. Um, And I think that's mainly because now, because of my schedule. So I work throughout the day, and then at night is when most I have the most ideas, and I need to move. Um, so typically I'll like practice for like an hour. Um, I used to do it like every day or nearly every day, but now it's honestly like 2 to 3 times a week. And it varies. Usually, like I'll do like a warm up and some stretches, and then like I'll watch like a old video of one of my favorite dancers, and just to get my juices flowing, and then just move my body to some of my favorite songs. And then if I'm feeling like really creative, like, okay, this song is moving me to do, something with it, like perform, then I'll write down ideas and stuff like that, or ideas for costumes. And, it varies depending on what moves me that particular evening.
Do you do any cross training as well, or?
Um, I have been going to the gym. I do it begrudgingly, but I know I have to do it. I've been looking for, dance classes in my area, and I haven't found anything that's caught my eye just yet. But also looking into Pilates and things like that. It takes me a while before I, you know, dip my toe into something. So I've been looking, but I do have a gym that I go to a few times a week.
I think it's fascinating to me, like how dance weaves into people's lives, right? Like if you are like if you're teaching on a constant basis, then it's actually can be really difficult to then have your own personal practice because you're like so tired, or like actually like my body can't handle doing another like hour of like training in that type of way or whatnot, or and also that interesting balance of physical training, of like inspiration training, of musical training, like of all the different things that can feed and weave in, that are a part of really developing your art.
Yeah, yeah. And now that I'm not teaching like in person classes, I'm not really teaching at the moment. Um, it's easier for me to like focus on my own training and technique, because at one point it was, teaching multiple classes a week, and practicing with my dance company, and then I was dancing, but I wasn't like feeding myself as a dancer. I wasn't um, pouring back into myself. So now I get to do that, um, now that I'm not teaching in person at the moment.
And have you always had a separate job from your dancing sides of things, or how did that weave?
For the most part, yeah. There was when I first started dancing, like I wanted to be just a professional belly dancer and that be it. That was my job. Um, but there was also a part of me that wanted to continue my education and get my degree. So I always had either a part-time job or a full-time job um, while going to school. So now that I'm done with school, finally, um,
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, working full time, in my field of study, which is awesome, which fulfills me in that capacity. And then also there's the dancing, which fills me, creatively. So it's a nice balance.
Yeah, for me personally, been trying to figure out, I've always been a dancer and like in that artist space of juggling whatever random projects and gigs and piecing it all together. And I think the pandemic had many lessons for many of us. But one of those was like, wow, I am really hungry for a little more stability than that constant hustle too. I actually am kind of tired of doing that hustle in that same type of way. So I recently went back to school and graduated as well, and was trying to figure out how to create something that could be more sustainable, that would still, like, yeah, feed me and not feel stifling either. In the type of way that I think a lot of other, like, quote unquote regular work or jobs can feel when you've been in a creative field.
Absolutely. I think with my work, um, I'm giving back, to my community in a different way than I'm giving back to the dance community, or that I'm participating in the dance community. So I, what am I trying to say? um, it's very, I feel complete now, because when I was focused more on the dancing, there was still a part of me, like, you know, there's the Ahava, and then there was like Ahava off stage. It's like, who is this person? What does she contribute to society? And I didn't know the answer. So when I started going back to school and figuring out, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to work in mental health. So that's how I'm contributing, and that's you know how I'm helping my community. And then there's the artistic side, like, okay, how I can do X, Y, Z, can teach, can coach, and perform. Um, and so they're blending now, as opposed to feeling like unbalanced, which I
Mhm.
have felt for a long time.
So within that, are there any creative goals that you have forward, or kind of feeling that out?
I feel like I'm always in a state of feeling things out with my with my dancing. Um, at one point, I wanted to have like a yearly um, student showcase, because I was teaching a lot at the time, and I had a lot of students who were wanting to perform. And I did one showcase, and then I started focusing on school and work again. So I wasn't able to um, continue with that. So now I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't know. I feel like because I wasn't dancing for, a good portion of the pandemic. And now that I'm starting to dance more now, I'm getting my feet wet. I'm trying to go, like, okay, what's out there? Because feel like I've been out of the loop for a while. So I'll figure it out eventually.
Or we don't, and that's part of life, and we just kind of keep creatively moving forward.
Yeah, there was that too. Yeah.
At one point, you took a very specific break from kind of the community.
Mhm.
Um, would you mind sharing and talking about kind of the thoughts around that?
I had to step away because I felt like things are really toxic in the community, and it wasn't good for my mental health. So there was a lot of back and forth that I felt like showed the really ugly parts of the community, and it was really disheartening. So there was a dancer who made a controversial video, and I had reposted it and said, "Hey, this isn't cool. Like, this is racist." And then there was like this backlash, um, what felt like a backlash. That was my experience, um, for Black dancers who were, addressing this video and being gaslit. Like, hey, that's not happening. That person wouldn't do that. You're making this up. Um, and then there were, it was a big conversation, And then it spiraled into like other conversations and just like people doxing other people. And it was just like, oh my God, I need to get out of this. It was super toxic. And at the time, uh, I was at a place in life where like I felt okay to step away, because there were so many other great things happening in my personal life that I could focus on and that I wanted to focus on. Had it been like, I don't know, 10 years prior, then I probably would have felt like my world was like imploding. But at that point in time, I was newly engaged, I was working in, my field of study. I was, you know, looking at graduate programs. Like it was such a happy time. And so I just decided to pour into that and into those areas of my life instead of being fixated on what's going on the internet and, who's talking about who. Um, and I needed to do that. And I was okay with it. And it felt good to not, you know, have to feel obligated to be in the know about what's going on, in the dance community. I was okay with just like not knowing a lot of things.
I I, I mean, one, I love our dance community. It feels like a very dysfunctional family, but it's it's been such a space of where I have met so many incredible people that I wouldn't have crossed paths with otherwise. Um, but as a researcher and as somebody that is just looking at trends of things, it is just an interesting side to look at the fact that especially in the United States, we have so many kind of subcultures that are specifically created. It's a chosen membership that you get a chance to, like, I partake in this dance form, so now I'm a part of this community of people, and then we formulate different types of social engagement rules and conduct and everything along those lines and different narratives, right? We're really like building a subculture within that group that has also lent itself to a different understanding of dance versus like in most other areas where dance is just an integral aspect of a cultural sense of identity, and is in a part of being in a membership of a group of people because of usually who you were born with, your family membership, right? Like, or who you marry into, or like these various like bloodline aspects of things, right? That then allow dance to be just an additional side of the community connection. Whereas for our dance community, it is like the pillar in the middle, but also it's nebulous, right? Because it's not the same dance form. It means different things to everybody. How we define it is different. How we engage in it is different. And I think all of this is kind of coming to the surface in this really interesting way. I'm just going to use the word interesting because I have a lack of a better word for that right now. It's multi-textured as to what that means, especially in the current landscape, right? When we're thinking about, I don't know, post-pandemic, I don't know when that post portion happens in things, right? But also in the fact that in that incubator time when most of us were like confined to our home spaces, how we were starting to have these very intense conversations in digital spaces where there wasn't necessarily a focus on dialogue, right? It was there was a lot of postulating that was happening. There was a lot of uh, kind of ensuring um, connection to whoever they felt was like in power. Like that's how it felt from my observations of things. And at a certain point, I removed myself from just about like almost all of the Facebook group pages and everything because I had my own health stuff that I needed to focus on. And I didn't have the energy to be able to handle or hold any space for it. but I still have this like dedication to this community because it is so much also as the like where I found myself, like where I, was able to be comfortable in my own skin and explore kind of a connection into a global society in a bigger way. But this kind of different approach that we have to who we are as a community based around an activity, but not necessarily a shared sense of identity, is potentially problematic. But it's also been like a gift for so many of us that I'm wondering if we are holding on to some of our kind of past associations, out of just the sheer love of how it has impacted our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, like as this was happening, like I mentioned, I was like really disheartened because it was like someone like took off my rose-colored glasses. It was like, this is the reality, and I was like, what? Like this doesn't make any sense because I too have met so many incredible people, and I've been able to, also find myself as a person by being a part of the community or being involved in it. And, so when these conversations were happening or, when this uh, event, I guess, I don't know what to call it, when it happened, I was just like really outside myself and just like, what is going on? Like I couldn't make sense of it. It didn't feel real. And um, I, I just had to step away because I was like, what? Like this was not something that I thought would happen. But, to be honest, as a Black dancer, I have noticed, you know, the way things are different for myself as a Black professional dancer, for someone who does not identify as a person of color who is also a professional dancer, and the opportunities are different. Um, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh no, that wasn't the case, because that has been the case. I've always felt like I had to work 10 times harder, just to, you know, showcase my talent. Um, but even with that, I still felt like I had found some really genuine good people. And so when all of this was happening, it made me like second guess everything. So I had to step away just to make sense of it all for me.
And then what felt good to then dip your toes back in?
What felt good was just the fact that like I love the dance. I love what it does for me and the joy that it brings me and the opportunities that it has given me. And I also know that it's such a it's not my entire being, but it's a major part of my life. And even though when I stepped away, like I was filling up other areas with other things, but I miss dancing. I missed it. I miss teaching. I miss my students. I miss, you know, listening to. I wasn't even listening to Middle Eastern music for a long time. Like I was just like, you know, almost detached from it. But like I missed it. I miss practicing. There's so many things that I had been doing for years that I stopped doing, um, that I genuinely miss. So when I started listening to music again in my car, when I was sitting in traffic, like all these great memories were like flooding in. And I was like, man, I miss this. and texting my students like, hey, how, what's going on, how you doing? Like, wow, I miss them. um Even like watching belly dance videos on YouTube, I miss doing that. I miss, you know being inspired and moved by great dancers. So I missed it. And so I was like, it's no harm in like practicing again. There's no harm in that. And then it felt like the universe was like, okay, so since you want to practice, since you want to listen to music again, then, I was getting the, hey, we're doing this event, can you teach here? Or, hey, are you still performing? Can you perform at this event? And I was like, okay, so, and then that's where that anxiety came back. I was like, "Ooh, I haven't done this for a long time. Can I do it?" So that self doubt was like popping up like real hard. Um, but for the events that were like 6 months away, I was like, "Yeah, I could do that. I could prepare myself for that." But for the one that's like 1 month away, I don't know if I can do that. But um, I don't know where I was going with that, but I felt like when I started to allow myself to move again and, you know, listen to the music and do those things, then again, those opportunities started to pop up again. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna tread lightly, but I'm gonna try it.
Yeah. Well, and we're very excited that to have you down here in LA for Legends, talking about like getting into more teaching opportunities and such. And it is going to be because you taught as a part of Legends during the pandemic, so it was all online. So actually being in the studio with bodies moving in the space together and everything, I think is just going to be absolutely fantastic and wonderful. And you're teaching hip technique, which will be really fun, which will be super
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I love working on hip work. I think it's really important to have like really strong hip and hips and sharp, crisp movements in the hips. So I'm looking forward to teaching in person again, and working on some hip techniques.
So music seems like a huge source of inspiration for you. Um, what is currently inspiring you within your dance?
I love, um, I think she's Egyptian, Shireen. I love her voice. Like a lot of her newer um, albums, like I listen to when I'm driving home from work or driving to work. She has such a beautiful voice. And um, who else am I listening to right now? Um, she's the main one. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone just to. Uh, Asala, I think that's how you pronounce her name.
Mhm.
I love her voice as well. Those are the main two that I have like on a repeat when I'm driving in the car.
Fantastic, fantastic. Music is a huge motivator for me as well. Uh, so do you find within your creative process that it generally starts with the music, or you were talking about sometimes it being from watching an old video or something along those lines?
It's uh, more often than not, it's the music. Like if I'm like listening to a song on repeat, and then again, so I drive a lot, I commute a lot. So um, if I'm listening to the song and I'm like starting to like draft up like choreography and steps in my head, then that's a sign to me like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I can perform to. So typically it's the music, and then with that, um, I start to think of like costuming, like, oh, what color should I wear with this, or what style of costume should I wear with that? And I also am someone who enjoys making costumes. I haven't done it in a long time, but like when I was like heavy and making my costumes, that would be a part of the process as well, like drawing the sketches and going to the fabric store, picking the fabric and all that stuff. So yeah, music moves me in so many ways and it allows me to be creative. Um, yeah, I enjoy that initial process of putting the piece together.
Fantastic. I didn't know that you designed costumes as well.
Yeah, I do. Well, yeah, it's a hobby. I used to do it with a student of mine who was really, really good at making costumes from scratch because I had when I was first started dancing professionally, I was making my costumes, and then I stopped because I was like, I wanted the pharaonic costumes and the Iman Zapis and invested in those costumes, and then when I stopped working in restaurants and gigging every weekend, then I had that downtime to be like, oh, okay, well, I need to do something with my hands, and I started making costumes again. And she sort of, that my student sort of like encouraged me, like, you can do it, like, I can help you. And so I was making a couple of pieces for myself. And then when I had my dance company, I taught them how to make patterns and um, we would make our costumes. And it was such a great bonding experience. So, yeah, I enjoy being creative in that way as well.
I think I always like the idea of it, and then the actual process of making them about halfway through, I'm like, okay, I'm done. And just becomes out of necessity because in having a group and you're like, okay, we need to costume this many dancers. We don't have an obscene budget to be able to do that otherwise. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of half done projects that I just had to throw away. I was like, you're never going to finish this. This was such a great idea, but like it's super intricate. Like this is not happening. So just it's time to let it go. So
Yeah, I'm a big fan of very decorated fabric, so I don't have to add a bunch of stuff to it.
yeah, same.
Fantastic. Well, do you ever think that you'll have a dance company again?
I think about it often. That's so funny you asked that because I was thinking about it for the past couple of weeks. Uh, I would be open to it because I did enjoy, working and creating with the dancers that I had and going around performing at different festivals and um, they had did one competition and so it sort of was bringing me back to when I started competing as well. So I would be open to it. I just something that's been difficult is like finding the space to do it out here. The studio where I used to teach was just really close to my home. It shut down and it's like a hair salon or something. So now I have to find a new space. And that's why I've been like super hesitant about, whether I want to teach in person again. Because it's super convenient, like to rent out the space and then, I would have my weekly classes and then the dance company would meet and then I had like online students that I was working with. So I had a space to, really teach, you know, at and I don't have space in my home to do it. So now I'm just like in that search mode for like where are the dance studios? I think COVID had an effect on, the availability. So now it's like very sparse, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, we lost a lot of dance spaces, venue wise as well as education wise, through the pandemic. And those that were able to shift in some type of way, whether that was like online programming or something along those lines, right? A lot of them had so much overhead with their space that they kind of shifted, right? Like what they have physically speaking. And I haven't seen any studies yet along those lines. Dance usually kind of gets left out of those studies. But it would be interesting because I know at one point I feel like every week I was hearing about another studio that was closing.
Hmm.
Uh, but dance is such a visceral experience, and having resources to be able to teach online has been amazing. I mean, I shifted everything I did in the studios to online immediately, and so I was able to teach all through the pandemic, and I think it kept all of us a little more sane. I'm not going to say totally sane, but a little more. And I just started teaching in person again, and it was it reminded me in the depths of my heart, like why that is such a profound experience, when you're in the same walls and moving together and breathing together, and like what that effect has on us. And there's also just people that have a really hard time learning online, right? Like whether distracted by various things in home, or um, like seeing their own image as a part of the experience so much, or whatever the case is. So I'm hoping that we can nurture our spaces to be able to have more accessibility so that dancing can happen.
Because you're right. Like, again, part of the nerves for me from not teaching for a long time in person was because I hadn't done it in so long. But like, I did miss like seeing the students' faces, like when I taught something that was a little difficult, or that asked a little much of their technique, but like still like being encouraging, like, oh, you can do it, or let me break this down, or going over drills, or like telling my little stories of when I used to dance every week. You know what I mean? Like, I love that rapport that you build with students when you're teaching in person. It's such a great experience.
Yeah. And that's why that sense of community is so profound, right? That connection that we get with people, and as we bond over dance, and as we grow over dance, and as it changes in our lives, but as it always welcomes us back as well.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful. Well, as we are wrapping up, is there anything last things that you would like to share?
Um, Nothing, except I'm really excited to be in LA for this event and to have been invited back. I'm very humbled by, being asked to not only teach but perform. And the title is just so trippy for me. Like, Legends, I'm just like, oh my God, even though I've done it before, but like, I just sort of like sit with that, like, whoa, like that's such an honor to be asked to be a part of this event with such amazing dancers. Like, truly, I can't believe it.
It's fun to be able to look kind of in a larger picture of things, and talk to various people, and notice trends over decades and everything, to see how somebody can have such a profound influence, and you have. So I'm excited to have you as a part of Legends, and I'm really excited to take your workshop and to be a part of the gala. And it's going to be a fantastic weekend.
Yes, it really, truly, I can't wait.